Hello, 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 everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in your day. Welcome back to the next few sections of Chapter 7. And this one, we're talking about the archetype wheel in Chapter 7. So it's titled Reinventing the Wheel. And in the last video, we started to talk about each house, and there are 12 houses in the wheel, 12 pieces to the wheel, and 12 archetypes that you will have chosen from to place in the wheel. And so I've given you lots and lots of archetypes to choose from. And of course, you can always research your own. And then once you figure out your archetypes, the next goal would be to place one in each house. And each house has a chakra, one or more chakra that it's connected to, an astrological sign, and also sort of like some keywords that will help you determine where each archetype is going to go. So we read 1 through 4, and now we're going to read 5, 6, and 7, and maybe 8, and then we'll read the last 3 or 4 in the next video. So let's go ahead and get started. So the 5th house is creativity and good fortune. And this is connected to the 6th chakra. And in talking about the 6th chakra, we're talking about because we're just doing 12 houses. So, and we're not doing the 8th chakra because the 8th chakra is, according to the author, where our soul contracts lie. That is above the crown chakra. So the 6th chakra would then be our third eye because your crown is your 7th. So this is connected to the third eye. The sequence of fire, earth, water, and air is repeated twice in the zodiac / archetypal wheel. Leo, the second fire sign, is aligned with the 5th house, which rules creative expression, sexuality, children, and good fortune. This is also the house of love and spontaneity, of abundance and opportunity. The archetype that resides in this house is the one that represents the strengths that you should most rely on to make things happen. After grounding yourself with a home base, you instinctively move on to exploring the power of creativity and the creation of life. Because the 5th house rules creativity, it corresponds to the 6th chakra, which regulates intelligence and imagination. The shadow aspect of the 5th house manifests as the expression of creative or sexual fire out of control, as in the misuse of sexual power or creativity for selfish or manipulative ends. One can use creative talent for unethical or illegal activities, or for sexual seduction and manipulation. I remember a man named Will, who had the most outrageously wonderful personality. He was the incarnation of charisma, and everyone adored his company. Will made people feel that anything was possible, and he could see the light in even the darkest situation. The archetype in residence in Will's 5th house was the child, and he was exactly that, almost a fairy tale figure who inspired people to see the good in life. Whenever events caused Will to slip outside the sweet atmosphere of his childlike innocence, he would imagine himself as a child again. He also would become an imaginary father to his child memory and could comfort this child by walking him through the years of his life. Will the parent would point out to Will the child how frightened he had been at age 6 about something, and how by age 8 it had worked out all right. He summed up his imaginative ability by saying, "When I slip, I return to my inner place of reminding myself of all the many ways everything worked out without my having to do a thing. Someone is watching over me because I sure can't organize all the things in my life." That's a message I love to share with others no matter where I am. And as someone who runs a fairly large corporation, I can tell you that this attitude is in short supply. The need to create is an essential aspect of consciousness and spirit. But to define and determine our creative ability by our professional accomplishments, even artistic ones, is an illusion. Will embodied the energy of creativity in its highest expression because he channeled that electricity to jumpstart the spirit of everyone he met. He also represents another profile of creativity. the creative nature of the self that does not have to do something outside of itself in order to be recognized and validated. Now we have the 6th house, occupation and health, and this one is connected to the 2nd chakra, and that is down in the sacral plexus. The 6th house corresponds to your 2nd earth sign, which is Virgo, and rules your occupation and health. The earth energy of Virgo differs from that of Taurus in that its focus is on grounding you as a person to the main work of your life, rather than on the physical cycles of nature of the 2nd house. The focus of this house on occupation is survival oriented, and the archetype that resides here influences how you seek out paths of security. When you are in the midst of a business transaction, for example, your 6th house archetypal pattern will play a very prominent role in the way you interpret business-related conversations and opportunities. The challenge of the 6th house is to balance work and health. An archetype might indicate unhealthy or destructive habits that do not serve your physical well-being, or it might indicate how you negotiate your ethics and morals for the sake of financial and job security. Because this house is involved with money and values, it most closely corresponds to the 2nd chakra. A woman named Kathy chose the detective archetype as one of her 12 patterns, and it ended up in her 6th house. Kathy said that she had chosen the detective because she had a natural talent for solving mysteries. Unfortunately, she directed this talent into a shadow aspect, spying. She even admitted to having an attraction to voyeurism, although she labeled it merely a fascination. Whenever Kathy felt insecure, which was frequently, either by choice or weakness, she would use that feeling as an excuse to rifle through the files and personal belongings of her coworkers in search of memos or other communications. She claimed she was looking for evidence of plans to undermine her position in the office. Wow. I asked Kathy if any of her efforts ever paid off by proving her case. Well, no, she said, but so much the better. It's very comforting to learn that you are secure at work. When I asked Kathy how long she had had this need to play detective, she said that from her earliest memories, she recalled feeling compelled to sneak around to find out as much as she could about everyone, from parents and friends to colleagues. She admitted that she had once been fired after being caught going through someone's desk. Kathy was convinced that people were spying on her and that she felt she had to spy on them for her own protection. I recommended that Kathy consult a therapist, and although she said she would, I could tell that her sense of safety resided in her feeling that she could discover others' secrets. That's a new one. Kathy's story illustrates how we unconsciously influence the health of those around us. Her paranoia was felt by her coworkers and subtly influenced their own well-being. Ask yourself on a regular basis, how does my behavior influence the health of those around me? This question is a natural bridge to the 7th house, in which your health, including the healthy or unhealthy ways you hold about your life and other people, becomes part of what you bring into all of your partnerships. Very interesting. Now we have the 7th house, marriage and relationships. And this is connected to the 2nd and 4th chakra. So that's going to be the sacral plexus and, let's see, root, sacral, soul, heart. Makes sense. I have to keep going like that because we started from top to bottom. So now it's in my head top to bottom. All right. So the sacral plexus and the heart makes sense. The 7th house includes marriage as well as other forms of partnership, such as close friendships and business relationships. This house is aligned with the astrological signs of Libra, the 2nd air sign. Unlike Gemini, which rules communication in general, Libra represents the more intimate kinds of communication between individuals. The central quality associated with Libra is balance, symbolized by a woman carrying a scale. This house is also prime territory for acts of betrayal, which so often reveal the shadow aspects of relationships. Because the seventh house rules both business partnerships and marriage, it corresponds to the energies of the second and fourth chakra, which regulate money, values, and matters of the heart. By our very biology, we are designed for physical, emotional, and psychological partnerships. Our relationships with one another are prime areas in which to glimpse our contracts. We can also see them through our archetypal partnerships: parent/child, mentor/student, servant/master. During the normal course of every day as we go about our business, extraordinary dialogues take place between our souls. If I were to see you in a workshop, for instance, my teacher archetype would engage with your storyteller as you recounted how archetypes work in your life. Although the storyteller isn't one of my intimate archetypes, your story will add to my life as a teacher. Your storyteller, in turn, can profit from your exposure to my teacher, because I may be able to help you see a greater meaning, wisdom, or spiritual truth in your story. People who have embodied both these archetypes at the highest level include Jesus, the Buddha, Homer, and the many anonymous sages whose wisdom stories make up the Bhagavad Gita. I think I got that right. The Upanishads and Sufi, Taoist, Hasidic, and African teaching stories. Partnerships can also play out in more mundane situations. Some time ago, I was invited to the home of some friends who were hosting a dinner party for 14 of their favorite people, although most of the guests knew only the couple who were giving the party. As I was meeting the other guests, a man named Bruce introduced himself in a loud, obnoxious manner, doing everything he could to draw everyone's attention to himself. I couldn't get away from him fast enough, but he followed me in a persistent attempt to make me find his humor amusing. Then he unexpectedly became very composed. "You know," he said, "I like clowning around with these guys. I started playing the clown with them years ago, and now they kind of expect me to be the life of the party." The moment Bruce referred to himself as the clown, I wanted to get to know the man underneath the makeup. We talked about the common associations people have with the clown archetype. And then I asked him if he related to the perception that many clowns hide feelings of loneliness behind their masks, or need their costume to communicate feelings they would otherwise have to keep private. Bruce said that he was definitely a different person when he was clowning around, and that he often felt he was actually communicating affectionate feelings or criticisms that he could never otherwise express. As he regaled me with some of his adventures, he set up an atmosphere of play in the room, making the other guests more comfortable with each other. In a sense, he was forming a comedic partnership with every other person in the room. "Do you ever resent the fact that people expect you to be the party clown?" I asked Bruce. "I would definitely resent people, including myself, if I felt that I was always expected only to entertain everyone when we got together," Bruce said. "But I am actually pretty well-rounded. The clown is the part of me that allows me to meet friends. If all I did was goof off, no one would take me seriously. I believe in the power of being optimistic, and so when I am in a bad place, nothing works better than humor. And I'm the same with myself as I am with everyone else, which is a good thing, because I can see how tempting it is to show to the world only the side of your persona that does the most for you." Besides being an enjoyable dinner companion, Bruce made me take a good look at how certain assumptions were clouding my own perceptions about particular archetypal patterns. For one thing, I realized that I never liked the kids in school who were class clowns. Their behavior drove me crazy, and somewhere around the 4th grade, I decided that clowning around was something that people did to hide their failures. Bruce woke up all those memories and helped me clean out a drawer in my psyche, finding, and I hope fixing, an attitude I hadn't realized I had. Bruce's clown provided me with some Libra energy, or balance, for my teacher. We invest great energy in enjoying, maintaining, or recovering from our relationships. And in the process, we learn more about our motivations. One of the healthiest gifts we can give ourselves is to constantly monitor our reasons for being critical and controlling. The challenge is to allow others to be themselves, regardless of our fear or insecurity. That's huge. Maintain your core relationship to yourself and live according to the truth that the greatest gift you can give to another is a fully healthy self, your own. All right. And then I'll go ahead and read the 8th house, and then we'll read 9 through 12 in the last video for this. I think that's going to conclude. I don't think there's anything else in this chapter after we read the houses. Let me just take a quick look. Yeah. All right. So the 8th house, other people's resources, and this is connected to the 2nd and 6th chakras. So again, the sacral plexus and the 3rd eye. This house corresponds to Scorpio, the 2nd water sign, and water, as already noted, is the element most connected to your emotional nature. Scorpio is also the ruler of secrets and secret activities, as well as the passionate energies associated with erotic sex. The most closely guarded secrets usually have to do with either sex or money or both. Unlike the 2nd house, which deals with personal ownership, the 8th house rules your use of money in the public arena. The theme of inheritance in this house relates to your financial and legal concerns, your DNA, and your ancestral biological memory. Legal and financial matters involve both your intellect and your sense of values. And so this house is influenced by the energies of the 2nd and 6th chakras. 8th house issues bring out our darkest shadows because, as Benjamin Franklin once noted, the true test of a person's character comes through in matters of family inheritance. This house takes our involvement with power outside of our personal lives, marking a passageway into the more public arena of external power. You want to understand the emotional nature of this house because money, sexuality, and secret knowledge are seductions that can block your pursuit of your divine potential. Dealing with these energies can be extremely challenging. It is difficult to remain emotionally centered and empowered where financial and sexual matters are concerned. Money, sex, and power represent authority and security. So when these areas of life are threatened, or we perceive them to be, we become extremely fearful and can act irrationally. Expressions of the shadow of this house present themselves in the arena of legal and financial misconduct, including, among other things, misappropriation of business funds and family conflicts over matters of inheritance. In this house, we can also discover the magnificent force of our strength and courage during our most vulnerable experiences in life. Many of the contracts you have with other people come together because of money, sex, and power. And this house, too, carries the potential for betraying and misunderstanding. Yet bonds of loyalty and love are also inherited qualities. And this house and archetype may be a great source of strength to you. The following example of a relationship between two people is what I describe as a classic 8th house contract. Alfred had an extremely dark nature. He was jealous, greedy, and manipulative. To me, he represented the spellcaster archetype. He actually admitted to being addicted to money, sex, and power because he felt that he was on the road to recovery. Yet even though he was aware of his shadow, it obviously still ruled his mind and spirit. He seemed to be using his recovery to cast himself as someone who did not mean to use others, but was simply not in control of his power. He clearly manipulated others so that he could feel superior. Within 2 days of meeting Alfred, I met a woman named Susan who'd been involved with him and who confirmed that he was a master manipulator who had slowly chipped away at her self-esteem, a subtle form of spell casting. By making her feel inadequate and continually correcting her both in public and private, Alfred slowly drained her self-respect. I find it funny that we call it self-respect and self-esteem, yet at the same time we blame others for damaging or chipping away or ruining our self-respect and our self-esteem. It's kind of a paradox. It's very ironic that those are the words that we would use talking about ourself and what we should be doing for ourselves and allowing others that power. But it's very easy to do. It happens to a lot of us, especially in the realm of romantic relationships. All right. By making her feel inadequate and, I already read that, constantly correcting her in public and private, he slowly drained her self-respect so that she eventually believed she was as weak as he insisted she was. One day, however, Susan had a moment of insight and snapped out of the hold Alfred had on her. In that brief instant, she saw that she'd been made a slave to an evil wizard, and that she was not who he said she was. She broke the spell she was under so thoroughly that she realized she no longer had any emotional ties to him whatsoever. Susan freed herself psychically and emotionally, and even felt gratitude for having been forced to liberate herself. In Susan's mind, she had a contract with Alfred that led her into her own strength. Both of them had ultimately benefited from their dysfunctional relationship, which is unusual. However, and then period. Susan went on to healthier relationships, as we're all meant to do whenever we find ourselves in unhealthy ones. And Alfred actually did further work to control his addictions and his craving to control others, although he did admit that he didn't truly want to become the person he knew he should become, because his addictions served him so well. Alfred's true challenge was that he liked his shadow. Intellectually, he could admit that he was causing negative consequences, but he had also convinced himself, or cast a spell on himself, that made him emotionally immune to the hurt he did to others. The archetype matched to your 8th house is the one that is your guide into your fears, challenges, and strengths in dealing with money, inheritance, and sexuality. Keep in mind that what lies beneath your fears cannot always be fully understood within the confines of one house. The archetypes and the houses with which they are partnered are points of entry into your chart. Each entry point provides you with a different specific perspective. But to view your overall contract, you ultimately need to draw on the whole chart. If you had a crisis about how important money is to you, or about your resistance to having a full life, you would look at the 2nd house, because those are issues of personal values. You should also refer to the house where your saboteur is located to see if a thematic connection exists there. But if you are investigating a business or financial relationship, you would begin the process of interpretation with your 8th house archetype. Then study that same relationship with another archetype and house, proceeding through the wheel one by one. This is like putting a wide-angle lens on your psyche and soul. Okay. So that completes those archetypes. And as I said, we will read 9 through 12 in the next video. That's going to be the 9th house connected to spirituality in the 7th chakra. The 10th house connected to our highest potential and the 5th and 7th chakras. Not very much connected to the 3rd chakra or the 7th chakra. Very interesting. I find there's only like one that's connected to the 7th, if I'm remembering right. The 11th house, our connection to the relationship to the world, and this is connected to the 4th and 6th chakra. And then we have our last one, our 12th house, connected to the unconscious, I can never say that right, connected to the 6th, and here's a 7th chakra. All right. And then after we're done with the 12th house, we just have a little paragraph to kind of round out the whole chapter, and then we'll be moving on. So yeah, we'll go ahead and just put a bookmark in it right there. Thank you all so very much for joining me. I love you all. And until I see you again, as always, please take care of yourself. Please take care of those around you. And I will see you all again soon for the last 4 houses of this chapter, talking about our 12 houses of the archetype wheel. Take care until then. Bye-bye.